Good morning. I think it'll be morning with you, and well, it might be afternoon. Hello. Um, Sorry, I'm not there with you in person just now. My wee girl has a cough, so we're getting tested. Um, this is my third attempt to record this loom. I was up until 1:30 last night, but loom kept crashing on me. So at the end of this attempt, you'll either have a loom and you will be watching a video in class, hopefully, or loom will be receiving a very angry phone call from me, interspersed with tears about the amount of time I've now wasted. Hopefully you are watching this. Hopefully it's not taking too long to get set up. If you are watching it, thank you very much to whichever staff member has set that up. I really appreciate it. What I'm going to do in today's lesson is going to take you through, as you can see, elements of narrative. In fact, what we'll do is we'll go close and we'll go open. There we go. So yeah, hopefully it's Monday the 31st of August and you've got this opened and working in the triple period on Monday, rather than me kind of playing it on Friday out of malice because I made it anyway, so it's definitely getting used. I'll hopefully be back by Friday at the latest. So we're going to be working on narrative today, as you can see. Sorry. We're going to be working on narrative today, as you can see. The reason for that is I would much prefer to be with you in class for language. Some of the elements of language that we'll be looking at are quite specific, and the PowerPoint I have for them requires me talking through the PowerPoint that I have for them. So I think it's just easier if we do something that's a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more straightforward. And my decision was that was narrative. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be recapping the basics of Todorov's narrative theory, and then we're going to be looking at how narrative is adapted to fit the TV structure, which will allow us to link into category. The first bit, looking at the basics of Todorov's narrative theory, is very much a recap of what my National 5 kids did last year. It will be for anyone who took National 5 media with me last year. It will be very much just looking over what I'll be very much just looking over what we did last year and consolidating your knowledge. And for people who didn't take media last year, when we're looking at Todorov's narrative theory, don't worry, it might sound very fancy and complicated. It's not. It's very, very straightforward. It's probably a narrative structure that you are already aware of, even if you're not aware that you're aware of it. And I promise you it's nothing to be concerned about. Once we've recapped that, we'll move into kind of the realms of the new, and we'll be looking at how a narrative how a narrative should be adapted for a TV series, and that'll link us into categories. Okay. I was actually about to ask if there were any questions, but that's obviously a redundant question for a recording. Can I check? I want everyone to have out jotters, pens and pencils. There will be points where I will ask whichever kind member of staff is in the classroom with you to pause the presentation so that you can copy down certain things on the board or engage in certain tasks. So you will need out your jotters, pens and pencils. So if there is a member of staff in the room, can you please pause the presentation and make sure they have something to write on if you don't have your jotters papers down the front. Cool. If for whatever reason you guys have been set up with this video, and because there's likely to be staffing issues around the department anyway, if not the whole school today by the sounds of it, if there isn't a member of staff in there with you, when I ask you to write something down, can you also have your phone out and ready to take a picture of it, and then at the end of the loom, can can you then copy it down? All right, so at the end of the limb, take a wee 10 minutes and copy down all the bits in yellow that I've asked you to copy down. And that will hopefully be fairly straightforward. I'm going to move on now. Your learning intentions. Firstly, I want you to understand what Todorow's narrative theory is. I think that's fairly straightforward, or it would be if I had actually written the is. Secondly, I want you to understand the structure of a TV series episode. So a specific episode in a TV series and how the narrative structure of that works. You'll know that you've been successful in today's limb if you can identify the key elements of Todorow's narrative theory and explain how they work in a piece of media. You will also know you've been successful if you can identify the key narrative elements of a TV episode and explain their function. When it comes to the second part, explaining the function of both Todorov in general and Todorov in TV, that we will touch on today, but realistically, that's going to be more Friday's lesson. Okay? You don't need to copy that there. Moving on. Can you make sure you take Todorow's narrative theory as your heading? I would take a new page because this isn't anything to do with language. Okay, so take Todorow's narrative theory as your heading and take it on the new page, as this has nothing to do with language. So the first thing that I'm going to need from you guys is I need you to have a basic understanding of what Todorow's narrative theory is. If you took media with me at National 5, then you should already know. But if you didn't, like I said, don't worry, it's not that scary. All Todorow's narrative theory is a way of referring to the idea that all classic pieces of media use a similar structure that is defined by a few key areas. At this stage, we've seen 2 episodes of Buffy. When I'm teaching you Todorow's narrative theory, I'm going to teach it using Once More with Feeling, because it's a little bit more complicated, so I want to be able to talk you through that. Once I have taught you Todorow's narrative theory, there'll be a few tasks, and I want you to answer them in relation to Hush. Hush is a little bit more straightforward in terms of how the structure applies, so I'm not too concerned about your ability to do that. At this stage, if you haven't got Todorow's narrative theory down as your structure, as your heading, then you really need to hurry up. Once you've copied down Todorow's narrative theory as your heading, I need you to copy out these 5 titles, but I need you to leave a bit of space, because in each case there's a little bit in yellow that will appear after them, which is going to be your definition. So leave yourself at least 2 lines, if not 3 or 4, depending on the size of your writing. But yeah, I need you to copy these down under your heading. These are the elements of Todorow's narrative theory that we will be looking at. Some people have slightly more elements of Todorow's narrative theory. Some people talk about slightly less elements. I believe that these 5 perfectly sum up what you need from the narrative theory. So we start with equilibrium, disruption, quest, resolution, and then a new equilibrium. I'm very, very quickly going to talk to you about how all 5 of these work together just now on this slide, and then we'll move on and we'll look at them one at a time in a little bit more detail. So when we talk about equilibrium, that means that there's a status quo, there's a normal, there's a way that things are. Might not be good, it could be something bad, it could be person A is a slave and they've been a slave for the past 5 years. But that's still a status quo. That's their normal. Unpleasant, but normal. Whatever the status quo is, the movie really kicks off when you hit your disruption. Before that, your status quo maybe establishes the world that your movie is taking place in. So your equilibrium maybe establishes the world, so a bit about setting, maybe a little bit about character and things like that. It introduces you to kind of the key players, and then you have your disruption. Now, your disruption is where something happens. If you imagine, I'm not just randomly wiggling my mouse across side to side to distract you. If you imagine your status quo, your equilibrium is like a flat line because things are just normal. They're just consistent. Your disruption is a sudden jolt away. If we were plotting it on a graph, especially the action on a graph, your disruption would be a sudden kind of change. Okay, so in the terms of Todorow's narrative theory, the disruption is where something happens to upset the equilibrium. If you're looking at an action movie, maybe somebody gets kidnapped or something like that. If you are looking at a war movie, maybe somebody, a country invades another country. If you're looking at, it doesn't all have to be bad things, by the way. If you're looking at a rom-com, maybe two people meet, and fall for each other, or seem to start to fall for each other, and that disruption to your equilibrium there could be, person A is forever alone, and they feel like they're coming to terms with that. It's a bit grim, but they're kind of okay with it. And then, oh my God, they met someone, and this person seems awesome. That would be your disruption, and it's a positive disruption. Your quest is where, pardon me, your quest is where the characters endeavor to deal with the disruption. All right, I'm saying deal with because it doesn't necessarily have to be fix or resolve. It could just be kind of come to terms with it or work it out. So if it's an action movie, Liam Neeson living a kind of happy enough life with his daughter. She's been kidnapped. The quest is to find his daughter and kill everyone involved. All right. Or your quest might be person A has forever alone. They meet someone, and the quest is to try and build a healthy, successful relationship with that person. Right? Your quest will make up the majority of the movie. Your equilibrium and your disruption tend to happen fairly early doors, and your quest makes up the majority of the movie. Your resolution is what comes towards the end of the movie, and it's kind of the payoff for your quest. Your quest ends, as it were. It doesn't need to be successful. Your quest can end in failure, but whatever happens, your quest should end, and that is your resolution. All right. If we have forever alone person meets someone, tries to make the relationship work, the point where either the relationship has clearly worked or the relationship has clearly fallen apart, that's your resolution. Liam Neeson living a happy enough life, his daughter's kidnapped, he goes to hunt down everyone and find her, he finds her, and he kills everyone involved as promised. That's your resolution. Okay. Horror movie, family move into a new house, weird things are happening, maybe it's haunted. The child who knows it's haunted tries to convince the family while the family live in ignorance, but oh my God, it's definitely haunted, and some of them die, but some of them survive, and they escape the house. That's your resolution. Okay. Your resolution is just where the key elements of the plot end, not the whole film, but the key elements of the plot end and are resolved, hence resolution. And then you have a little bit of falling action before you have your equilibrium. And what your new equilibrium is a new status quo. It does not, and it rarely is, the same as your first equilibrium. It tends to be new and different because your characters and your narrative have developed over the course of the film or TV episode. All right, you have a new status quo. All right, Liam Neeson living happily enough with his daughter. Daughter gets kidnapped. He hunts down everybody and he kills them all and saves his daughter. And a new status quo where he's a little bit kind of closer to his daughter and his ex-wife because of what he's managed to do. Forever alone guy meets someone that's very nice. Oh, they're trying to make the relationship work, and in the final kind of throes of the film, against all odds, they make it work, and forever alone person is now with the person of their dreams, and isn't that nice? That's the final bit where you have the new kind of status quo. That's your new equilibrium. All right. I wanted to talk you through that as a collective because what I'm going to be doing now is breaking it down one at a time whilst also looking at Buffy, so you won't get the whole overview until we move on to Hush. So, equilibrium. There is a status quo. Doesn't need to be pleasant, but there is some kind of established order. This is generally true of of almost every episode of Buffy. This is generally true of every film as well. It starts with a way that things are. If it was your first time watching an episode, or if it were your first time watching a film, in the first few minutes, you would think, right, this has been established, this is how things are. Now, and once more with feeling, it is a little bit more complicated to fit it into Todorow's narrative theory. The reason for that is the episode opens with a song. It opens with Buffy, all singing, all dancing, going about her day-to-day activities. She wakes, she engages in some domestic chores, and she goes on patrol, singing the whole time. Odd, but this then becomes the established equilibrium. Okay? If you were watching Buffy for the first time with no prior knowledge, you'd be like, a musical show about monsters. Weird. But on board, because musical shows about monsters are awesome, and the episode is awesome. But if we're at a film, for instance, it would probably be different. Where at a film, it would open with, I would imagine it would open with kind of establishing Buffy as the Slayer and the group and things like that, without singing, and then a wee chunk of the way in, it would break into singing, and that way you'd understand, oh, this is weird. This isn't normal. This wasn't a musical 5 minutes ago. And that would be your equilibrium would be just the establishing of Buffy's character and the other characters. Whereas in this one, because it's a TV show and because they are more limited by time, they kick straight in by establishing an equilibrium where Buffy is a jaded Slayer. She's not herself. She's definitely depressed, and the world is also a musical. Well, we've clicked on to disruption now. Your disruption refers to the moment that something happens to upset the established equilibrium. A little bit challenging when we're looking at Buffy, but I would suggest the disruption is the singing itself, but not that people are singing, but when people realise that they're singing and that's weird and not okay and needs to be stopped. Because prior to the moment where Buffy walks into the magic shop and goes, did anyone else burst into song? And everyone's like, oh my god, I actually did. That's not normal. And that's when people start to act differently. People start to be like, oh, we need to stop this. People start to talk about what they were singing and things like that. So for me, I'd say the equilibrium, although it's not true of the equilibrium for the whole show, the equilibrium for that episode is that it's an all singing, all dancing episode. Then you have your disruption. People will be like, wait a second, that's weird. And then we move on. Sorry, I should have said, if you haven't already, can the member staff pause here so that people can get equilibrium and the definition copied down. Anything in yellow, like I said, needs to be copied down. If there is no member staff, I'll pause and give you a wee 10 seconds to grab your phone out and take a picture. But other than that, make sure that you've got equilibrium and the definition copied down. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing for disruption. Can you take a wee moment to get this copied down? If you don't have a member staff, can you make sure you have a picture of it so that you can get it copied down at the end of this PowerPoint? For the next ones, I'm not going to pause for 10 seconds. It's just I forgot to say that right at the beginning. For the next ones, I want you to be on the ball, and while I'm talking, either get it copied down or take a picture. I will ask the member staff if there is one to pause the video, but that will very much depend. So, disruption. Then we move on to our quest. The quest is much more straightforward. It's where the characters set out to fix whatever the issue is that has been revealed or caused by the disruption. And once more with feeling, OMWF, once more with feeling, the quest is to discover what is causing the singing and dancing in the town and to put an end to it. If there's a member staff, can you please pause this and let them copy that down? You can see here I've got these GIFs. These are just from a song, like one of the songs, kind of a good way in. This song is building towards the resolution, but I would say it's still in quest time, and we don't start the resolution until a wee bit later. I don't think there's really anything more to say about the quest. I think it's more or less straightforward. Right, so we'll move on. Then you have the resolution. For me, the resolution is when Buffy confronts the demon called Sweet. The resolution that the definition for resolution that I need you to copy down is here. The resolution refers to how the quest and the underlying issues are resolved. How does the narrative conclude? The narrative, not the whole episode. So when I say the narrative, I mean the story with its arc. How does it how do the events and the action end? It's worth highlighting that if you took media at National 5, I might have also talked to you about climax as well as resolution. We're going to roll them into one. Resolution will cover climax as well. So what that means is for the episode of Buffy, we've got our equilibrium, all singing, all dancing, disruption. Wait a second, that's weird. Our quest to fix it. And then a resolution, I would argue, is Buffy confronts Sweet, and so that might be our climax previously, but for me that's still resolution now. Buffy confronts Sweet, the demon, and ultimately survives. She's saved by Spike, and ultimately she survives, and Sweet leaves without taking Dawn as his child bride. Okay. It's also important to note that he leaves after a number of truths about Buffy and indeed the whole gang are revealed. And that's quite good because that shows you the relevance of this GIF. I actually spend quite a lot of time choosing GIFs that are relevant to what I'm talking about. And this one is relevant here because the gang come together to face off against Sweet, but it's also relevant. Oh, can you make sure that if they're still writing and there is a member staff, can you please pause the video and make sure that they have this copied down. But yeah, the GIF's relevant in the hand-holding coming together to fight off against Sweet. But then we move on and they break apart, and that comes under a new equilibrium. So remember, your equilibrium new is a new status quo or normal is established. It may be better or it may be worse than the original, but it is the new normal, whatever way it falls. And once more with feeling, the singing stops and life in Sunnydale goes back to normal for the majority of its citizens. However, and this is the new bit, the relationships in the groups are severely strained, and Buffy and Spike appear to be, no, we've gone too far, appear to be starting a blossoming new relationship, which, if you know anything about the show, is at that time deeply unhealthy. That is the new equilibrium. I'm not going to go any more into detail about that yet because we will wind up talking about it more in a moment. But your first task. On the next slide, I've broken the episode Hush into 5 short descriptions. Right. Each of these will be one of the elements of Todorow's narrative theory. All you need to do, and I'm hoping you'll find it quite straightforward, is sort them into their correct order. So equilibrium, disruption, quest, resolution, equilibrium, new. Write them down in your jotters with the correct label. Okay? When I say with the correct label, don't just write them in the right order. Write equilibrium dash and whichever one you think is the equilibrium. Disruption dash and whichever one you think is a disruption. So on and so forth. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. So, these are our 5 elements. Each one of these describes one of the stages in Todorow's narrative theory. You just need to work out which is which and write them in the right order. So, Riley smashes the box containing the voices. Buffy screams, the gentlemen's heads go bang. That would be 1. The gentlemen arrive at Sunnydale and steal all the residents' voices. That would be another. Buffy is a college student. Both Buffy and Riley are struggling with hiding their secret identities from one another. 3rd. Voices return to the populace. Things return to normal, except now Buffy and Riley are aware of their secret identities. and their potential love life is awkward. And the gang endeavour to work out what's happening, whilst also attempting to keep residents safe. So in this, you will have an equilibrium, disruption, quest, resolution, and another new equilibrium. If you're struggling with which ones falls into each category, you might just want to think about what is the chronological order, because unless it's a flashback or time jumping episode, then that tends to be another way of looking at your equilibrium while looking at Todorow's narrative theory. So if there is no member of staff, make sure you have a picture of this, because at the end I'm going to ask you to sort it correctly anyway. But if there is a member of staff, if you wouldn't mind very much pausing this and giving them an opportunity to complete the task, that would be awesome, and thank you very much. I just punched my table. Ooh, that's a very big spider. Oh, he's keeping himself to himself, so that's fine. Sorry, there's a huge spider on the floor, but it's on the other side of the room, so it's okay. So, this is what you should have. Your equilibrium is that Buffy is a college student. That's what is established in the opening. Now, some of you might be sitting there going, what about the dream sequence? And that's something slightly different. Firstly, it's a dream. It doesn't necessarily change anything about the equilibrium. And if anything, it just establishes Buffy's secret identity. But we will talk later. But you have Buffy as a college student. Both Buffy and Riley are struggling with their secret identities and hiding them from one another. That's the established world. Okay? Doesn't matter if you go back a couple of days or if you went forwards a couple of days without the gentleman, that would be the reality. So that's their equilibrium. The disruption is the arrival of the gentleman at Sunnydale, stealing all the residents' voices. Okay? It's creepy and it's definitely out with the norm. It's kind of your monster of the week disruption. The quest is the gang endeavouring to work out what is actually going on, whilst also attempting to keep all the residents safe. Okay? Going on patrol, all of that stuff. Like I said before, your quest tends to be the longest section, so that pretty much starts from when they wake up in the morning and realise their voices are gone. Maybe a little bit, that could still be the disruption as we come to terms with that. But as they kind of realise that all the voices are gone, and they meet up at Giles's house and start to try and work out what's going on, and Buffy goes on patrol, all the way up to the just before the fight in the clock tower, right? Which would then come under your resolution. In the fight in the clock tower, Riley smashes the box containing the voices. Buffy screams, the gentleman's heads go bang, and that's kind of our resolution. The gentlemen are defeated. And then there's a new equilibrium. Voices are returned to the populace and things return to normal. All right, that's I keep doing this back. That's what our resolution is for the majority of the people in Sunnydale. But the new element is that Buffy and Riley are now aware, or becoming aware, of each other's secret identities, and it's awkward for them again, because why wouldn't it be? If you manage to do this already, the video was paused on the previous slide, can you make sure that you have something like that down? And if you don't, you might want to just take a picture of this and copy it in later. Everything we've done up until now has been Nat 5, or more Nat 5 than what we're going to look at from here on out. Everything we've been looking at so far has been how does Todorow's narrative theory apply to a basic understanding of narrative. But for a TV series, or to a certain extent a movie franchise, and I'm going to clear up what I mean by that straight away before I tell you what I'm talking about. When I say a movie franchise, franchise maybe isn't the right word. I actually should have maybe put series. Franchise. I should have actually maybe put series, because when I say franchise, you could think things like the Iron Man movies or the Thor movies, but I don't. What I mean is a series of movies that work together to create one kind of linear, continuous narrative. I'm thinking more Lord of the Rings. I'm thinking more The Hobbit. To a certain extent, I'm thinking more the Star Wars kind of sets of trilogies. Each one of them, although you could watch kind of the middle movie without ever watching the first or the third, in each case, it wouldn't make nearly as much sense. Okay? It would still make sense, but it wouldn't make as much sense. So for a TV series or a movie series, you have to be aware of two different ways that you can apply Todorow's narrative theory. The first is closed. Okay? A closed application of Todorow's narrative theory means that the particular element of the episode that you're analyzing can be fully understood and appreciated and enjoyed in isolation. Can you get that copied down, or can you take a picture of it? And if there's a member of staff again, if you wouldn't mind pausing the presentation, that would be amazing, and thank you very much. So, what I mean by this is we're looking at all the elements we just looked at. For most of this that I've written down here, you don't need to have watched Buffy before to firstly understand what's going on, or secondly to enjoy and appreciate what's going on. Right? You could watch the episode of Hush, and indeed it was the first episode I watched with you guys with very little kind of preamble or background. It was the first episode I watched with you guys, and I think most of you enjoyed it. I think most of you thought it was a pretty good episode. And if you didn't, it's because you're wrong. It's an excellent episode. And the reason you enjoyed it is because it had a closed application of Todorow's narrative theory. Buffy being a college student and Buffy and Riley having secret identities, easy enough to understand. You don't need to know anything more about them to appreciate that's what's going on. The gentleman arriving at Sunnydale and stealing all the residents' voices has no connection to a previous episode. You understand that in isolation of this episode. The gang endeavouring to work out what's happening whilst also attempting to keep residents safe, although some of the nuances are connected to previous episodes, your basic understanding that they're there to help is made very clear in this episode on its own. Riley smashing the box and that contains the voices in the box, and Buffy screaming and killing the gentleman. Again, this you need no understanding from before this episode, and you don't need to watch beyond this episode to understand what's going on there, so you can still enjoy it. And the voices returning to the populace and things returning to normal up to here is still a closed interpretation of Todorow's narrative theory. Okay? What I want you to have a think about is, why is it so important to have a closed narrative in a show? Why is it important to have an episode certainly why is it a good idea to try and ensure that every episode of your show can be enjoyed in isolation, i.e. someone who has just put on the telly, because remember this is a 90s show, someone who's popped on the telly, Buffy is the thing that's coming on, and they thought, oh well, I'll sit down and have a watch of an episode of this. Why is it so important, especially at this time, that anyone sitting down and watching a random episode will still enjoy it? Who are you trying to make sure the episode applies to? Sorry, I'm just gonna... Yes, I do go into it, that's fine. I wasn't sure if I gave you the answer to that question or not, because like I said, I was making this last night, and I've already forgotten that apparently. But moving on. So everything we've understood about narrative theory so far is mainly applied to the closed interpretation. The open one, and again we're going to be copying this down or taking pictures, the open interpretation of Todorow's narrative theory means that though the criteria for Todorow's narrative theory applies to elements of the episode, true engagement relies on either or both of the following: knowledge stemming from previous episodes, or the commitment to watching further episodes. What that means is, though you can have closed elements that make up the core narrative, as they often do, a lot of the nuances, a lot of the character development and relationship building is open. What that means is you need more of an understanding of the show, you need to understand the characters by watching previous episodes, or you need to be invested enough to see how things play out by watching further episodes. Alright. So an open kind of application of Todorow's narrative theory is where we have to have a broader understanding of the world to appreciate all elements. Any element that you don't fully appreciate or understand because you're watching that episode in isolation would come under open kind of application of Todorow's narrative theory. Again, can you make sure you've got a picture of this, or can the member of staff make sure that it is paused and sorry, pardon me, that it is paused and that big stretch, and that you've got a copy down. Thank you very much. So, for instance, when we're looking at open Todorow's narrative theory, it's most apparent in development of relationships or characters within a show. So if we look at Once More with Feeling, when we first look at that episode, Tara and Willow are getting along great. And if you haven't seen the previous episodes, then that just seems like a nice, healthy relationship. You're like, oh, look at them go. But it's because Willow put a spell on Tara in a previous episode. Okay? And that's the background knowledge that you need to truly appreciate what's going on. Willow has put a memory spell on Tara to get her to forget about a fight that they had. Your disruption to that relationship is that Dawn causes Tara to realise they had a fight. She goes, oh, I don't like it when you guys fight. I'm glad you made up. Tara's like, we didn't have a fight. And Dawn's like, well, yes, you did. And Tara realises something might be wrong. And then she looks at the pillow that she's got on her top. So the pillow, the flower that she's got on her top that she found under a pillow. And again, if you were watching the previous episode, you'd know that this is connected to a memory spell that Willow put on her to make her forget. And then you have your quest. Tara attempts to ascertain what's happened. If you have this understanding, that makes sense in isolation, and the resolution, Tara discovers Willow caused her to lose her memories and freaks out. Now, even the freak out itself, which though obviously understandable, the extent to which she is really getting angry is made more understandable if we appreciate that that in a previous season, Tara had her mind drained and seemingly destroyed by the big bad. So she's obviously feels very betrayed and feels like this is a violation, despite the fact that Will knows what's already happened to her. So you still have a greater understanding if you've seen it already or seen the show already. Tara's furious, and this will ultimately end the relationship for a time. This is only made clear in the next episode, okay? The full ramifications are only made clear in the next episode. So there's a few areas where understanding the real impact of what's going on is only possible with an appreciation of what happened in previous episodes. It's true of Xander and Anya as well. If you don't appreciate that Anya's an ex-vengeance demon, then you don't appreciate Xander's freak out or his insecurities so much, and you also don't understand as much about Anya's whole personality. So again, it applies both ways. So you have to get this, get a picture of this or get it copied down. So if by the end of me talking that through it, you haven't, make sure you do have a picture of it, or if there's a member staff, if you wouldn't mind pausing at the end of this as well so that they can copy it down. An open narrative is accessible to fans. It builds characters, plots, and relationships, and it keeps loyal fans engaged. All right. So when you watch a show, a one-off good episode isn't enough to make you to commit you to it. It needs to have characters developing, relationships developing, things moving forward. Right? And if it doesn't, then you'll eventually get bored, because it'll just feel like each little story is in isolation as opposed to a solid continuative narrative. A closed narrative is accessible to anyone. It builds a full storyline in one episode that even new watchers can engage with. And this means it's more likely to catch their interest and convert them to fans. Alright? So your closed narrative is for making new fans. With streaming on kind of modern television and things like that, it's less likely that you will randomly encounter an episode halfway through. You're more likely to go, this is a show on Netflix that starts from the beginning, I'll watch from here. I'll watch from the beginning and see if I like it. Which means that this is less applicable in the 21st century, certainly in the 2020s, than it was in 1990. But it is still applicable. You might go around to our friends and they'll be like, I'm watching this show, watch an episode and just put on the episode they're on, or something like that. It is still possible. Also, we still have shows that do air on TV. So again, it is still possible. But with streaming, it's less important to have each episode have a closed narrative, because theoretically, if you're going to watch a show, you're going to stream it from the beginning, not watch it from 3 seasons in. Moving on. Testing, yay! I didn't get this far last night. This is as far, it was on the slide both times that my PowerPoint died last night. And at 1 o'clock, I was like, I'm not doing that again, because if it dies again at 1:40, I'll just wind up bursting into tears. So that's when I went to bed. So what you're going to do is you are going to watch an episode of Buffy. It's not the one that I planned for you. It's not one of the ones that I planned for you necessarily to watch in class, but it is an interesting episode, and it deals with the relationship between Willow and Tara, and that relationship kind of developing, the reaction of Oz, a previously lovely guy and ex-partner of Willow's, to this lesbian relationship, and how that might represent some of the societal reactions to kind of LGBTQ plus relationships. And it also has the inception and depiction of a romantic LGBTQ plus relationship on TV in America. And this is important because, again, the way that it's done is it's done well, and the fact that it was done on TV at all is massive. But again, you'll hopefully start to see stark contrasts between the way that Willow and Tara's relationship is depicted versus the way that some of Buffy's are depicted. So, what I need you to do before that episode starts is I need you to copy down this grid in your jotter. I would take pretty well a full page for it. And in it you should have Todorov and each of the 5 stages, and then a closed interpretations of narrative and open interpretations of narrative. So when you're looking at closed, you're looking at any of the narrative that works in isolation. So Equilibrium, Will and Tara seem to be starting off a blossoming relationship. So 2 people starting off a blossoming relationship. Disruption, ex-partner arrives. Quest, survive the ex-partner and protect the relationship. Resolution, survive the ex-partner, or do they? Yeah, they do. So on and so forth. That would be closed. Whereas your open interpretation might be focusing on the nuances of Ozzy's and Willow's relationship before Oz left, i.e. the fact that Oz is, and spoilers, the fact that Oz is a werewolf. These are bits of information that, though it's touched upon, a deeper understanding of it is more useful. And the open relationship might focus on the nuances of Willow and Tara's relationship. So I want you to do your best to work out what and how each of these applications of Todorov's narrative theory applies. If you're struggling, by the way, just throw it in either, so long as you're matching up equilibrium to equilibrium and disruption to disruption, so on and so forth. So make sure you've got that copied in your jotter. If you need a bit of extra time, if the member staff wouldn't mind pausing this, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Any element of the episode which feels like it requires previous knowledge to engage with is open. Any element of the episode which feels like you would have to watch on further episodes is open too. So if you feel like, oh, I wonder what happens there, open. If you feel like, oh, I wonder what happened there, then that's open too. So, whilst we're watching the episode, I also want you to be aware of the development of the relationship between Tara and Will. I want you to compare it to what you have seen of their relationship in Once More with Feeling and the start of the relationship in Hush. So this episode falls between the two. Once More with Feeling is much later. Hush is a little bit earlier. It will be crucial later when we look at feminism and we look at LGBTQ plus representation. Okay. The episode that we're going to look at is Season 4, Episode 19 of Buffy. It is streamable on More4. You will need someone to log in for you. I have emailed my login details to More4 to everyone in the department. So someone, fingers crossed, should be able to help out here. If the episode gets done, there's still there's still a fair amount of time, because I am aware I've only been talking here for about 30-40 minutes. So if the episode gets done and there's still a fair chunk of time, you might be able to hear my daughter coming up the stairs. We will persevere anyway. If the episode gets done and there's still a fair amount of time, there are extension tasks on the next slides, so don't close YouTube just yet. Just pause this video. And then if there's no member of staff, you will actually need to go and get member of staff from the English department and ask them if they wouldn't very much mind logging into my More4 account and putting on Season 4, Episode 19 of Buffy. It should be called New Moon Rising. Season 4, Episode 19, New Moon Rising. And if there's a member of staff, if you wouldn't mind pausing this, and if you're from the English department, in your emails will be my login to More4. And if you're not in the English department, if there's anyone kicking around that could log in to their emails and then log into my More4, that would be amazing. It might already be logged in. If the computer's been on over the weekend, I should already be logged in. That's possibly the first thing worth checking out. So, thank you very much. If you can pause this video and do that, and then if afterwards there's still quite a bit of time in the lesson, which there quite probably will be, then unpause the episode and unpause the video, and we'll have a chat about what to do next. So, pausing the video, watching Season 4, Episode 19 of Buffy.